Hello everybody and welcome back to the second of our Fleadh Forum webinars for this year. I'm Sarah Dillon from the RAP Fund and I'm delighted to bring you this panel today. It seems so obvious, producing in the regions. I don't know why we haven't done it before, but I'm hoping we're going to shed some light on all the great things about coming outside of Dublin and shooting in the regions. We have a great panel lined up and I think it's going to be a very enjoyable conversation. I just want to say a very quick thank you, obviously, to our sponsors, Screen Ireland, Screen Skills Ireland, Screen Producers Ireland, and this is a collaboration between the RAP Fund and the Galway Film Fair. I also want to say a quick thank you to Ray and the team at Unbound Media for helping us put all this together. They're doing all the work in the background, technically, to make sure this goes off without a hitch, so fingers crossed. If you do want to join in the conversation, please do. You can follow along using the hashtag Fleadh Forum and also contribute online yourselves. And we do welcome any questions, so please put them into the chat function here and I'll make sure they get fed through to Aideen to ask everybody participating today. And then finally, that just leaves me to introduce Aideen Doherty, who some of you probably know very well. Certainly if you've ever looked towards Donegal, she's a huge character up there, a huge advocate for filmmaking in the Northwest. And they are very, very busy at the Donegal Film Office, which she runs with her partner in crime, Sandra. They obviously welcomed Star Wars a number of years ago, so people will have seen those famous shots of the Millennium Falcon on Malin Head. And most recently, they have launched their own short film bursary, and they have welcomed Antonia Campbell Hughes' first feature, It Is Within Us, and the BBC A24, Screen Ireland and RAP funded project, God's Creatures, which stars Paul Mescal and Emily Watson. So I'm going to hand over to Aideen to guide you through this panel today. A huge thank you to her and also to all of our speakers today for taking a time out of their busy schedule. We actually cover every corner of Ireland. I think we're in Galway, Dublin, Donegal and Cork today, so we couldn't get a better regional spread. So I'll hand over to you, Aideen, and thank you.
Thanks very much, Sarah. Thank you. So you're very welcome, everybody, and I'm delighted to be in a position to host this session this afternoon. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what all of our contributors have to say. I'm going to start off by asking them to introduce themselves, and I'm going to start with John Brady and ask him to tell you a little bit about himself.
Good afternoon. My name is John Brady. I work as a line producer and a producer. I'm based in Spiddle. I also involved in Dano Media, where we produce Ross Naroon for TG Carr.
Thanks, John. And over now to our next contributor, who is Rob Walpole.
Hi, my name is Rob Walpole. I run a company called Treasure Entertainment with Rebecca O'Flanagan. We are based in Dublin. There's about 6 of us. Most recently, we would have had a show called Smother on RTE. We kind of do a mix of feature films and television, but with a particular emphasis on indigenous talent. Yeah, that's us.
Thanks, Rob. And over to Martina Nyland, who is in Cork today.
West Cork, yes, it's a completely different county. Yeah. So I'm Martina Nyland. My company is Port Pictures, film and TV company. I actually, looking back at the projects I've been involved with as a producer, a lot of them have been in the regions, actually more than I thought over the years. About to go into production on Holding here in West Cork for ITV. And I've worked with John Brady a number of times, most recently on Death of a Ladies' Man, which had its Irish premiere at Galway, which we shot in both Montreal and in the beautiful Connemara. Just before that, we were in North Mayo with Wild Mountain Thyme. Not sure if you heard of it. And then prior to that, yeah, a good number of projects from Kerry in Donegal. We had Grabbers a number of years ago. So yeah, it's a lot of stuff in the region, which I'm delighted about. I'm a Mayo woman, so mad for the regions.
Thanks, Martina. And finally, also introduce our final contributor, who is Elaine Gill.
Hey everyone, Elaine Gill is my name. I'm a tax advisor, specialising in advising tax issues for the film industry. I've had the pleasure of working with John, Martina and Rob, both in Dublin and on regional development projects. So I'm hoping today to shed some light on the regional development uplift aspect of the tax incentive and encourage more productions out to the regions and tell you the benefits of, certainly from a cash perspective, from the tax incentive of working there.
Okay, Elaine, nice place to start. And I will ask you maybe just to give us a little bit more information about that and perhaps just to help us understand exactly what the regions look like across Ireland.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Aideen. So I suppose, I mean, I guess the regions have forever been filmed in, but the incentive hasn't been good enough to push enough production down there, given the additional cost of bringing crews to the regions where there isn't an established crew base in some circumstances. So this was recognised by the department and then indeed by the Department of Finance, and they increased the tax credit available for productions in the region. Now there is, the government very kindly provided us with a map, and I think there's a slide that we have here that'll show you the map of the regions. The regions very much are excluding the shaded out white areas, which obviously is Northern Ireland for starters, but also most of Dublin, Wicklow, Meath, and in fact Cork, which is, you know, one might argue is strange, but I think you need to understand that this regional incentive is linked onto EU state aid. So Ireland had already been set up to obtain EU state aid in certain areas. So obviously Cork didn't fit the criteria for state aid in other areas, and therefore now does not get state aid for film production, which I know is a bone of contention for people wanting to bring the projects to Cork, but unfortunately this is what happens when we see EU state aid. Now what you can't see from the map, and it's actually even difficult to see on the document itself, is there are little lines between the various regions. So it's not possible to just head out of Dublin and say, I'm in the region and everything that I spend outside of Dublin now counts as regional spend. You actually need to particularly choose a specific region, and it's only spent within that specific region that counts as regional spend. Once you qualify for the tax credit, your total eligible spend attracts the higher tax credit amount. So that's something that confuses people sometimes. You are required to work out how much you spend in the region in order to qualify for the relief. But it's not just that spend in the region that attracts the higher tax credit. It's actually the overall eligible spend for the project that attracts the higher tax credit. So that makes it very attractive when you're looking at filming in the region. The second slide we have just gives you a very brief. Now, I mean, this is a whirlwind look at what are the conditions that I need to satisfy in order to be able to claim the tax credit. So, you know, first of all, to say it's an increase in the tax credit, currently moving from your standard credit of 32 this year up to 37%. That was due to expire, 37% was due to expire at the end of 2020. It's been extended out to the end of 2021. At the end of 2021, that's due to drop to 35% for 2022 and down then again. So there is a lot of pressure at the moment to see, can we get 37% retained, and that might be something that the panel would like to discuss later on. But at the moment, that's what it is 37%, where your project is what they call substantially produced in the region. Now, substantially is more than 50%. So it's more than 50% of the work that's happening, and more than 50% of the spend, the eligible spend, must be spent in the region. The eligible spend, just to work out what you're very briefly, if you're doing normal eligible spend and you talk about whether spend is outside Ireland or inside Ireland and how you qualify it for eligible spend, when you're looking at regional spend, you do the same thing, but instead of thinking, is it Irish, you think, is it regional? So for example, if you have a person coming to work on the project, they will qualify for regional spend for the time they are working in the region. So that famous person day schedule that we all love completing when we're making applications really should get, when we're doing regional applications, an extra column. And I think, you know, both Martina and Rob and I, we've done this before. We've put in the extra column and we've worked on days in the region. So now we have your overall days on a project, your days in Ireland, and your days in the region. And that helps you allocate the spend on people in the region. Goods and services is a little bit more complicated, because in order for you to get spend on goods and services, the company you're acquiring those services from needs to have a fixed base in the region. So that's where we get you know, look at spend and we say 50% seems really achievable, but then depending on which region you're going to, you may need to bring a lot of services with you. So suddenly we're looking at where we thought we would be, you know, 80 to 90% of our eligible spend would be regional spend. When you start doing the maths, it can come down to somewhere between 50 and 60% sometimes. But as I say, the cutoff is 50%. So once you're there, you're good. There's a significant emphasis on skills when you're looking for regional development uplift. And it's twofold. It's about identifying what the skills gaps are in the region that you're going to. And then it's about securing trainees, skills participants to come in and to work, hopefully in those areas. So the whole idea of the relief is that we get a production down to a region, we engage with the region, we encourage services to set up there, we you know, develop skills there, so that the next time when the regional uplift relief has gone away, it means that productions can go to the region without the huge additional cost of bringing crews down, because there are crews in the region. Now that's the very highbrow kind of, if you like, motivation behind the regional uplift. There's a big discussion and debate to be had around whether the period of time that we have regional uplift in place is enough to do that. So I'm not going to comment on that, because I think everybody on this panel has a lot of views on that. And again, that's another discussion. So just to really quickly talk about, you identify the skills, find the skills gaps, and then try and secure your trainees into those gaps. Anyone listening from Screen Ireland will kill me because I keep using the word trainee, and I know we should be skills participants now, so I'll do my best to keep saying skills participants. The tricky part of the legislation is that your skills participants need to reside within a 45-kilometre radius of your production base within the region. So you get your production office, you stick a pin in the map, and you get your compass out and do your 45-kilometre radius around, and you have to find people who reside in that area, and they're the ones that qualify as your trainees. And it's not just reside, they can't just move down there and rent a house and say they reside. The legislative reference is habitually reside. And habitually reside really means as permanent as you're going to get to permanent. Wherever you're living currently, feel that's permanent, that's your habitual residence. It's somewhere you have a real link to and a base, and somewhere that you will reside outside of working on this production, if you like. So that's a very, very now whirlwind, Aideen, look at what's the film tax credit, what does it do, and how does it work? And I think I'll add to discussions that the panel talks about their experience of being down there, and you know, if there's technical items we want to discuss, but I think that probably gives you a brief outline of how the incentive is designed and what it provides.
Thanks very much, Elaine, that's great. Well, just on that basis, I'd like to just understand then, taking all that into account, Martina, what were the deciding factors that helped you to locate your project to the region?
Well, any project that I have filmed in a region, I mean, was set somewhere other than, you know, Dublin, say a city or whatever. It was kind of needed that kind of specific kind of rural aspect to it, like Death of a Ladies' Man, for example, and Wild Mountain, and any of those projects. So it really was creative initially, that we wanted to try and make it work rather than having to cheat something, you know, in Dublin Wicklow. So I suppose creativity comes into it first and foremost with the needs of the project that you're looking to film. And then obviously it's very important personally to me to be able to bring projects to the region. Like I said, I'm from Mayo originally, and you know, it's a real kind of passion of mine to try and do that and continue to do that, and not, you know, so that I can work and maybe live for part of the year outside of Dublin and not have everything there. So that's a you know, real goal of mine. But obviously it's very challenging to do that at the moment. I mean, the advantages and the disadvantages, and the main, like we'll talk about that later on, but you are at the moment at least, and there are a lot more projects happening in the regions now in the last couple of years, which is great to see, but you are having to bring so much with you. and there is a cost to that. And obviously the uplift is and any funding regionally like the RAP fund is absolutely paramount to helping you do that. But the hope is that in time it would become, there will be more of a crew base, for example, in the regions that you can be tapping into and not having to bring everything with you. So very much, so that's sort of talking kind of in circles.
No, that's fine.
Is the first thing. What does this project need, and can we make it happen? And can we shoot where the director wants it to shoot, I suppose. Yeah.
Okay. And John, and just in relation to that, beyond what Martina's saying, I mean, would you highlight some of the benefits from your perspective just of shooting in the regions?
Yeah, just that thing on locations, I think sometimes we forget how distinctive our country is. You know, there's various areas with different looks. Even in Galway, there's a completely different look between East Galway and West. And even in West Galway, there's a huge difference between South Connemara and North Connemara. And for example, on Wild Mountain Thyme, it was the director couldn't find the location he wanted in Wicklow. I thought it would definitely exist in East Galway and West Clare, and we couldn't find it there. And just by accident, we discovered it in through contacts in Mayo. And I always thought of Mayo as more barren, but if you went to around the Ballina, Crossmolina area, it's actually rich farming land. So, you know, people have said during the lockdown, we've discovered Ireland through staycations, but actually it's been there all along. It's just we haven't really, and I think there's a lot of other places as well, like in Roscommon or even Fermanagh. You know, there's distinct locations that can add to your production creatively. There's also the local buy-in. People can get behind the project. We had great support in Carna for Death of a Ladies' Man. There was only one hotel in Carna. It's not really a tourist spot. But what we found out was there was a huge amount of accommodation. What a lot of farmers have built on for Airbnb as an extra income accommodation. And we were able to put up an entire crew, and the only hotel had 11 bedrooms. So if you can get the local buy-in, it's a great benefit. And then on the support side and this is happening in Galway, is like just for Galway Film Centre and a number of productions I've been involved in, they've helped source some small amount of finance for the initial scout. And that was crucial. That was like, when you have people coming in and you want them to buy in to shoot somewhere, if you can afford to help defer the costs of the initial scout, that was a big benefit. The RAP fund has made a huge difference. It's a very attractive proposal that it adds. Also the county councils, there's great support from the county councils, great awareness now in county councils of the benefit of a film and TV production coming in somewhere. And not just on the local spend, but the knock on in potential screen tourism as well. So again, if you can tap into the local chamber of commerce, they're a great source of information so that you can source everything that you need. So it helps to reduce the cost. So like the benefits of, you know, I think we're going to discover, I'm involved in a project in Mayo that's shooting in the Achill, and it's a Finnish director. And when he saw the locations up there, he was going, this is world class. This is like, he's never seen locations like this. I didn't say to him that I'd never been to Achill before, and I hadn't seen them either, and I was blown away. So we're discovering all the time new locations to shoot in. I'm involved in a project in Crosshaven that was set in a fort, and there was no other location like that in Ireland because of all these underground tunnels. The entire movie was built around that particular location. So, you know, there's huge advantages. If you can get local crew as well. Death of a Ladies' Man was mainly shot in Canada. A Canadian crew came in. It was in the downtime of Rossnaroon. So we were able to get the majority of the Irish crew locally. And that made a huge difference, and a huge difference on cost. And it was local people. So I think it was the first time the gaffer was able to literally walk out his door and do a 3-minute drive to his place of work. And that crew was well able to fit into that project that had a high bar as regards production values. So there's a lot of it.
Thank you. So Rob, I'm going to ask you in a few minutes just to give us an understanding about what you think filmmakers should do before, they move out to Regis, what practical advice and tips that you might give them. But before that, I might just ask that we would show the clip from recently from Smother. Maybe you just give the intro to that for us, Rob, if you would.
Yeah, this is a project. We've just shot the second season of this show, and we started the first season, just got 5 weeks into it when the pandemic hit and we had to stop. But in terms of the history of it, we had a very specific kind of set of location requirements involving cliffs and various other things. And we had looked up and down the coast. We'd looked in places we'd filmed in before, like Dingle, and up as far as Martina's favorite county, Mayo, and even a little bit into Sligo, but hadn't quite found what we were looking for. And sometimes, and this gives the sort of I suppose the lesson here in a way is, if you're asking about tips or advice in terms of how to find places or how to things to think about before you choose a location, I would say the first thing you need to do is always be kind of a little bit switched on, because actually we found this location because we were at a wedding in the Doolin Hotel and Rebecca had forgotten her swimming togs, so we drove to Lahinch to get some swimming togs, and the Irish Open was on at the time, so we had to drive around, come in the back way, and we saw the house, which was the main location in Smother, and we were like, why are we not here? So we weren't actually working, but we were just always a little bit having an eye to something that might work. So maybe if you want to show the clip, then I can talk a little bit more about the practicalities of how we set it up there.
Thanks.
The body was found this morning, and we have reason to believe that it's your husband. In case of your husband, I'm already in double figures.
We were his family. Families always fight. It's never easy.
You still don't think this was an accident, do you?
I had reasons to kill Dad. You had reasons. We can't have been the only ones.
Do you have any idea how often that man cheated on me?
You know it's all a lie. This whole family.
I'm always coming second with you.
Well, to my family, to my children. Grace will remember what I tell her to remember.
Do you think I killed Dad?
I don't. Dad!
Open your eyes!
Get our story straight, okay? I've always been here for you.
I don't give a damn about the truth.
I just care about protecting my family.
Brilliant, Rob.
So, I suppose the thing about that is, and what struck us about it was, we found this house, we were looking at it, we were going, this place is amazing, it fits all the needs of the story. But what really began to strike us was just, we all, I guess, went on a school trip to the Cliffs of Moher in primary school, and we all know it's there, and we all know the burn is there. And in fact, the first time I ever filmed that in my life was a nature program in the Burren years and years ago. But it's surprising how little use has been made of it. We found this house, which we really needed for this show. And then as we just drove around in a radius from that, we began to sort of realize how much stuff was on our doorstep there, how much amazing landscape, which really is unique and very particular to Ireland. And we were struck then by how little use had been made of that. So we found ourselves having a lot of reasons to base ourselves in Clare and in Lahinch, where this house was. Beyond that, John mentioned this a little bit. All of that then became almost like another character in the story, and people talk about the house at the center of this series as if it's a character. John made mention of local buy-in. We got extraordinary welcome. As soon as we went in, people, even if it wasn't going to directly benefit them and the business that they were engaged in, were doing everything they could to try and help us figure out a way to make it work in Lahinch. Lahinch in its time, and was really where we were based. So there's a sort of, there is a hierarchy of these things, and the first thing is story. and will the story work in the region, as opposed to, as Martina says, trying to make it work. If it works in the region, then, you know, it really does add an, you know, inestimable, kind of ineffable quality to the work that you're making. And then beyond that, it's just the practical stuff. And some of the other places we looked at didn't have the kind of range of hotel accommodation. There's a bunch of hotels in and around Lahinch. There's an awful lot of holiday homes. You know, so it became a very practical model. And because we were filming, you know, a little bit off season, which was partly just to make the model work in terms of hotel rates and all that kind of stuff, it also meant we were a very live unit. We could move around very quickly because all of the locations are really, really close together. Which is a really important practical thing when you've got a schedule that you're trying to shoot, you know, 6 hours in 12 weeks. So I would say, in terms of just the more general thing of making the choice, for certain, the first thing is story. And then after that, you really do have to have a practical head on you, which is project managing, and looks at how much accommodation have I got, how many locations have I got within a kind of range. And then to come down to crew, for the most part, you know, it is still the case that the majority of your crew is going to be coming from, you know, outside what is on that map that Elaine showed at the beginning. However, you know, it is interesting to me, you know, and it's happened to me all over the world, in Havana, in Ethiopia, and various places. You always find local people who are super smart and get the film business really quickly and get the requirements. And there's a real joy in that, you know, finding those kind of people who get what the demands are, what the demands of the schedule are, and how quickly we need to move, and how there needs to be absolutely no doubt that if something is supposed to be there at a particular time, it will be there at a particular time. And there's a real pleasure in that. And then beyond that, I just think the other thing I would say, and it goes a little bit to, you know, the length and duration of the tax credit at 37%. I really do think there are the beginnings of, you know, lasting effects from that initiative in terms of people in the regions who are skilled crew people. I have found it just over the course of shooting 2 seasons of Smother, we have lots of local people who came in either in the production office, in the camera department, in accounts, who, you know, I have no doubt, in the art department, you know, I have no doubt will have long and successful careers in the film business. And, you know, they are there. They're there within the 45-mile radius. There's lots of people, and there's a real pleasure in finding that as well. So I think, you know, if that were to be extended, you would find yourself, you know, maybe over the course of another 5 years, finding yourself in a situation where the percentages would tip a little bit, and be a bit of leveling up between how many people you have to take from Dublin and how many people you can get in the regions. And finally, I would say just, you know, the pleasure, a little bit like what Martina was saying, the pleasure of being outside of the sort of the constrictions of a city, you know, just the freedom you have, as John said, the buy-in, but also the lack of traffic, the lack of people, you know, the ability just to move around in a way is fantastic. And I think, you know, increasingly, as we get more and more busy in this business, it seems all over the world, and particularly in Ireland, I think there's a massive opportunity here. If we can keep this incentive in place and keep things like RAP and, you know, the various council film offices in place, I think there's a massive opportunity to have a business that is spread right across the country.
No, I think there's no doubt about that, Rob, and thanks for your contribution. I think that one of the things that you mentioned there is the whole area of trainees and, skills participants, Elaine. I think that, you know, that's one of the, I suppose, frustrations that we find here in Donegal Film Office. We have quite a lot of young people who have come out of college, and recently we advertised for the passport production. We had over 200 applications. We could only take so many, and I think we put through 14 people, and delighted that they all got picked up fairly quickly. We've God's Creatures in here, and a lot of them got onto that. Now God's Creatures has left, and all of those young people are left sitting. So it's difficult, I suppose, to balance, you know, that whole, you know, 45 kilometre, you train up people, and now they're sitting waiting for the next big one to come in. So just on that, I suppose, Martina, I'd be interested to understand what practical advice that you have around maybe recruiting trainees or skills participants and, you know, crew in the regions. Have you know, I know Rob has alluded to it there that he's not having any difficulties, but I would be interested to understand a wee bit more just about what your experience has been as well.
Yeah, I mean that I totally agree what you've just said there, because when we were filming in North Mayo, and we found great people, amazing people within the radius who were just became such key parts of our unit. And then we left. You need another production going in there, another, it's that type of stuff. They live there, and some of them then started to go back looking for other jobs, obviously, or whatever. So that is that's a real, and the only thing to deal with that, I suppose, is just sustained regional filming, and that they continue to provide work, and that people who were a trainee can step up on the next production, or skills participants can step up, can continue to grow and learn. In terms of how we recruit, we just, we engage with the local film office and put a call out really on social media, and did a lot of work obviously with the production team, and just trying to find, I suppose, first of all, where we felt what departments maybe were lacking skilled participants and growth in that particular area. And then from there, just really put a call out for those departments, and worked with HODs, and in terms of who would be, coming on board as mentor for these young people coming on the production. And then there's, like you say, there's no lack of CVs coming in. People wanting to kind of get experience. And that's also what's wonderful about the region, and shooting in the region, and very satisfactory, is that, it can be easy to feel that film and television is way over there, and for other people, and for, what I mean? And there's no entry point for some who live in maybe rural towns and villages around the country. So it's very satisfying for, for us as producers to work with young people in the regions. And then really after that, it was a case of just going through the CVs, working with like the line producers and the production team, going through the CVs and just kind of filtering it down. Unfortunately, you can only bring on so many people, budget wise, as well as everything else. That's it really. Then we hire a skills officer who then keeps, working closely with Screen Skills Ireland, obviously on the skills plan. Bring on a skills officer, and they will just check in with the trainees on a weekly basis and make sure everybody's okay, and that they're getting what they expected out of it, or what could be improved, and so on and so forth. So that's how we certainly did it. The film offices were key for us there, I suppose, so that they could tap into their social platforms as well in the call out for those.
Yeah, and I think that, Martina, I suppose certainly in Donegal we have a huge database of talent and crew that are in the area, and I think that's really useful, and to know that the film offices are there to be able to assist that. The one thing I'd say, I suppose, to all of you is that you shouldn't probably underestimate, and I'm sure you don't, the impact of having a film in a small town or village, and the economic output that gives to sustaining businesses throughout the back seasons of the year. I mean, at this time of year, everywhere, as you know, is chock-a-block because of the staycations. But I mean, I can't begin to tell you the difference that it makes in a small town or village when, the likes of a shoot comes in, and the money and the spend that's left there. And I suppose just the whole lift that it provides for that area is just, I mean, I've had people come on to me and say that following God's creature, their business would now survive. So, that's really, the value of it to the small towns and across the county is significant. But I suppose we constantly hear about, the constraint that's put in budgets, John. And I wonder if you just maybe could give us a wee bit of an understanding in terms of, that in remote locations, what can we do as film officers to minimise the impact on budget, or what should be done, I suppose, more to assist, I suppose, more regional production?
I actually think, like in production, we say your biggest enemies is time and money. And you're fighting those two constraints all the time. But really, the most important thing to do is to have a pre-prep time, because you're going into somewhere completely new. And the last thing you want, and this has happened to me on occasions, where you get a great buy-in from a community, but there will be one or two will see this as the cash register cha-ching in their eyes. And if you don't have enough time to sort of look at what your options are, you could end up paying top dollar. I remember on one occasion with a particular owner of a premises, we wanted to rent it as a storage. It hadn't been used in 10 years, but he thought we had loads of money, and we spent hours and days negotiating, and he just wouldn't come down the price. And he says, look, I know I'm being foolish here and I might lose this. And lucky enough, we had enough time to find another option. So like the pre-prep is really crucial. And I don't mean it's everybody. I think it's one or two key people to look at. Have you got all the ingredients around? Have you got enough locations to get the script covered? Have you got the hotels? And then have you got any backup services that you need? And if you can do that, then with a little bit of time, try and get your negotiations in. If you arrive in saying we're shooting in 3 weeks or 5 weeks time, people pick up on that, and they can literally charge you whatever rate they want. So having liaisons with the local film office, or finding a local fixer, or finding a local line producer is literally key. And just spending that little bit of time to get to know the area and who's who and what's what. That's the most important savings you can make. That's what I would say.
Okay. Thanks, John. Thank you. Rob, have you just seen finance or sales agents or audiences react differently to production shot in the regions versus cities?
I don't think you could say that there's any kind of generalized trend there. What I would say is, first and foremost with everything is story. So it doesn't matter. You could be shooting on the moon, but if it's a bad script, it doesn't matter. I don't know if there's any regional incentives for the moon, but so it seems like there might be. Jeff Bezos might be up there soon with a movie studio. But, I think first and foremost, it's story. So unless so to answer the question about, whether or not there's any extra appetite for things shot in the regions, or whether or not it makes any appreciable difference to the commercial life of your TV series or movie, of course, first and foremost script. But unless, for example, you're doing a film set in an area with something, really specific and unique to that area, and you're, shining a light on a culture that is, little known. I don't know that I would say that that is necessarily the case. I mean, I was listening to the art show last night, and Kim Bartley was talking about the documentary she made on a Native American reservation about bareback riding. That sounded to me amazing. I'd say if you had if you were to go to a sales agent with a film set in that world, that would be like Whale Rider or something like that. You could kind of go, okay, I can really see how they might react to that as a unique and specific thing that might really resonate with global audiences. But what I will say is just, a little bit to echo what John has said, there are so many unique and kind of particular and specific landscapes. And Martina is currently about to embark on a show in West Cork. I mean, it's just so beautiful. It's so stunning, and with Smother, which is sold all over the world, we keep hearing about the landscape. But I would maintain the story is what draws, people in, and maybe the landscape became part of the story in the way that we kind of developed the material. But yeah, for certain, I think there's an undeniable desire, certainly in television, people really do like the eye candy of some of the locations that we have in Ireland, for sure. You mentioned Star Wars before. I mean, those things are quite arresting. It's quite arresting how people talk about the Skelligs and talk about Donegal, and so undoubtedly it is a very, very interesting add-on to what is already, if you already have a very robust proposition in terms of story, which has some sort of relevance and some sort of place in the zeitgeist, for sure, all of the stuff that we have to offer across the regions, can make an impact to the commercial life or something, or, to the way in which audiences receive the story.
Okay. You've all referred to, obviously, the regional uplift, the 5%, the continuation of that. But I suppose I'd be interested to understand, Elaine, just whether or not, what else would make filming in the regions more viable? What else could we be doing, do you think? I'm a big advocate, obviously, of the uplift, and certainly would be pushing really hard to see that sustained beyond this year at 5%. So I'm interested to know what your thoughts are around that, and what we need to be doing to assist you to get that over the line.
Yeah, and it's funny listening to everybody here. There are two things. I think another 5 years, seems to be key. I think everybody feels if we could get a good fight. We lost, let's be honest, even though we did so well during the pandemic to keep so much stuff on the road, we lost periods of time. There were projects that should have happened that didn't happen, and we need to be compensated for that. But even if we hadn't lost that year and a half, I do think in order to properly do what the incentive is required to do, there's at least another 5 years of it needed. I also think, and it was interesting what you said about, Aidan, when you said about having a number of participants on your books who've just worked on God's creatures and now are looking for something else. If we removed that 45-kilometre radius requirement and allowed those people train within regions, so not even within, so even stopping the 45-kilometre radius and saying within their specific region, but actually allow them train within regions would mean you've got now this group of people who can travel to other productions that are happening somewhere else. And that's probably how you're really going to get the crews skilled up, because you'll only retain, so she is if she knows, because I've never worked in a film set in my life. I only know the narrative of it, often listen to people, but I would assume you retain so much of what you've learned if you repeat it and learn it again and again. I mean, you lose anything if you don't. So I think they would be, for me, two really key adjustments to the regional uplift. I think the RAP fund has been invaluable to anyone who's gone to regions as well. So, we have in place incentives. What we need to do is drive home the benefits of them, what we have managed so far. But fantastic programs we've thrown out with Smother, with Wild Mountain Thyme, with Death of a Ladies' Man, with God's Creatures coming, with so many others now heading down. There's a new project heading down to Mayo soon as well, I think. I mean, with these productions, we can show what can be done, that we need to push that home. So it's not just we want, it's also we've done. And if we can do both of those with the department, I think, we've got really good people who are advocates for working in the regions. I guess we all just need to come together and push it home.
Thanks, Elaine. So I suppose on that, just if I would, Martina, you might introduce Death of a Ladies' Man and just explain just the experience of that as well. And I'm going to assume that all of you will be back in the regions and working over the next number of years, and we certainly will be in a position to welcome you to Donegal as well. Martina, you might just see us out with that, and thank you very much for your contributions.
Thank you. So Death of a Ladies' Man is a Canadian-Irish co-production that I worked on with John Brady. Shot, for the majority was shot in Montreal, but there's a section of the story then that moves to Ireland, specifically Connemara, and that creatively was really important. That was where this character was coming back to, and we had a very specific, we needed to find a cottage, but specifically very close to the sea, and we found that in stunning Carna. And again, we're just welcomed so much by the locals there. And I have to just say, there's a shooting in the regions. There is this other thing that happens, I'm sure you'll agree, between crew and cast, and that the bond that some people don't get shooting in Dublin when everybody finishes at 7 and goes home. And I just think there's a stronger kind of, become a bit of a unit and get to know each other a little bit better as well when you can hang out, because you're all in this small town or village together. So that's hugely satisfying, and that's certainly what happened on Death of a Lady when our Canadian team were over here and our local team in Galway were together. So Gabriel Byrne plays the lead role in this, and it was just a really lovely experience. I think we have a little clip or something.
Dad? Hello, Sam. You're still dead, aren't you? Yes, I am still dead. You, on the other hand, don't look so good. I hear you've been having a little marital trouble.
I want a divorce.
Oh, yeah? Well, today's your lucky day, kid. You're gonna get one. There's definitely something wrong with your son.
Hey, Dad. My favorite son. Marriage is over. Not very surprised. Neither am I, really.
Papa, are you okay?
Yeah, everything's fine. Oh, jeez.
Is everything okay?
Maybe these are flashbacks.
Come this way.
No, but it's more like a dream. Where was I? You're going crazy, old friend.
Dead father and singing students aside, any changes in vision?
Only when I'm really drunk.
Samuel, do you have anyone you can talk to about what's happening with you?
Good. Apparently not.
like a bird.
So what we're looking at is an astrocytoma tumor. It's one of the largest tumors I've ever seen.
Like a drunken egg.
But if you need help with it, Sam, I do know people.
I'll be okay. I have an old shack by the sea. It's been years.
What are we doing here?
Me? I'm reflecting on my life. You? I have no idea. What happened between you and Mum?
It's tricky, son. To know what's in another person's heart.
Bonjour.
Your friends? Reading Leonard Cohen.
It's a small world.
Maybe what you need to start thinking about, another person, another anything, isn't the answer to every little last thing that's wrong with you.
On the wire.
You know something? You're a terrible ghost. Lame, terrible ghost.
I have tried in my way to be free.
Let's get you to bed.
I'm not tired.
I know, love. Let's get to bed.
Okay, folks, there's been a couple of questions coming online actually that I've been asked to ask you. There's one from Jane Applegate, who says, I'm producing a hybrid doc short in the US, France and Ireland. Does 50% of the total budget need to be spent in Ireland? Elaine, I think that's one for you.
If we're talking about regional uplift, it's 50% of the eligible budget. So it's not 50% of your global budget.
Thank you. And Tommy Weir to John. He says it underpins the value of visiting productions to collaborate with local production companies. It provides expertise and knowledge, and it helps a lot when you contacts in the wider industry. I suppose maybe, John, do you want to make some commentary around the contacts in the wider industry, in particular, because like we're seeing that a lot here.
Yeah, we're based in Spiddle, and Death of a Ladies' Man. We provided like production offices and trucks and stuff, lighting packages and stuff like that. So, and there's been over the last, since we've been involved in Roster in the last 5 or 6 years, there's been a number of productions that we acted as like a service producer. So I think it's a good point. It's a very good point. I think the development of production companies in the region is important as well, because they are more connected to the area that they're in than anybody else. So I definitely would say that is having somebody on the ground is crucial, you know, and it can be the difference between success and failure. So I would agree fully with that. And there are a growing number of production companies, and I do hope COVID, now that we've learned about this technology of Zoom, I know as for us as a production company, that has allowed us meetings with international companies that we would never have had. So I think the world is changing, and I would love to see more Dublin production companies move down to the regions. I think that would be a great thing to happen, and you'll have a better lifestyle, and it'll be cheaper, and you'll enjoy it a lot more.
Thanks, John. There's no doubt about that. I am going to be finishing up here around 4:30 this afternoon. I will be on one of the most beautiful beaches in all of the world in 10 minutes. So folks, I just want to say thank you very much again for your contributions, and I hope you all enjoy the sunshine this weekend. Take care now. Thank you.
Cheers.
Right.
See ya.